So my name is Deirdre Budzyna, and I'm a professor at Northern Essex Community College. I've taught there for 13 years. I teach in both early childhood and psychology, and I teach the College Success Seminar. I'm here because Northern Essex has a speakers bureau, which is good to know about. They have, I think, about 15 speakers that you can apply and have them come speak to your organization free of charge for you. So if you have an organization that wants somebody to come speak, it's a great resource for the community. So as I was saying, I came to hear about Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences when I was teaching in Salem, Massachusetts. I was teaching in the elementary school, the Horace Mann School on the Salem State campus, and they were opening a new school down the road. And so my principal was retiring and I decided to apply. I got chosen to move to this new, it was called a Massachusetts model school, similar to a charter school, but run a little bit differently. And it was based on the theory of multiple intelligences. So as part of our training, all of us were really new to the work. We didn't know much about it. And as part of our training, they actually brought us into Boston to hear this workshop on multiple intelligences. And I have to say it was one of the most boring days of my life. And I left there thinking, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? I was working this great job. I loved my job. Now I'm moving here. What was I thinking? But at the end of the workshop, the speaker said, you know, there's a really great book written by Thomas Armstrong, and, you know, educators find it really helpful, so you might want to read it. And it really was an aside. And the book was called 7 Kinds of Smart. And I was really desperate. I went to the bookstore that night, and I purchased 7 Kinds of Smart. And reading that book really changed my whole feeling about teaching. Once I had children, my whole feeling about parenting. And even working with community college students, it really informs the way that I present lessons to them. And basically what Gardner said was, it does not matter if you're talking about preschool or college. It does not matter if you're talking about America or England. If you ask most people, what does it mean to be smart? They almost always talk about 2 subject areas. And what would that be, do you think?
IQ.
No, subject, like subjects in school.
Math, science.
English and
Math and English. Right. So when they say somebody is smart, they're saying they're good at reading, writing, and math. And what actually Gardner was studying and researching, he was working at Harvard at, on a project called Project Zero, was that there are many, many, many people who are very successful who weren't necessarily fantastic at reading, writing, or math. And he started to discover, you know, why is that? What makes somebody successful? And, you know, what was interesting to me, when I started in Salem, it was a school that was really focused on multiple intelligences. So all the parents were buying into it. All the parents thought it was a great idea. They were on board. Then when I came to teach in West Newbury, the first day of kindergarten, I had 15 children. And I said to them, how many of you think you're smart? And can anybody guess out of 15?
all of them.
15. None.
2.
Oh my.
2. And what they said is, I'm not smart because I don't know how to read. Now this was day 1 of kindergarten. They already were feeling like not knowing how to read meant that you weren't smart. And people can tell you that there are many, many children who enter kindergarten who don't know how to read. And by 2nd grade, they know how to read. You know, so, but there was this incredible pressure that they were feeling from parents, from teacher, from society, that being a reader meant that you were smart. So Gardner, when he first came up with his theory, he actually had 7 intelligences, then he added an 8th, and now there's a 9th one under discussion. So as we said, the first one is linguistic. And I'm going to put down Gardner's words and then the way I speak to children about them. So I say you're linguistic or you're word smart. The second is logical mathematical. Or math smart. Can anybody think of another way that you might be intelligent? Another way you might be smart.
Extrasensory.
Space.
Explain.
I
Okay,
heard it.
spatial, visual spatial.
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 With children, I say that's art smart.
Okay.
What's another way? Think of subjects in school, maybe.
Science.
Science. He called that the naturalist, and that was actually his 8th intelligence. That wasn't in his original theory, that was added. What's another one?
I'm thinking building or.
So building
Lego
actually,
things.
building comes under visual spatial. So
Okay.
you're right. People who are architects, for
Yeah.
example, would be visual spatial because they can actually picture how things go together.
Oh, physical.
Yes, bodily kinesthetic.
What was it?
Physical.
Physical. I think of intuitive.
So yeah, so there are 2 social intelligences. So one of them is interpersonal,
Mm-hmm.
and that's somebody who's people smart.
Yeah.
And that can be somebody who is really social, but it also can be somebody who's really good at reading people, at understanding in a group, what does she need? So sometimes when people hear people smart, they think they have to be the life of the party. Sometimes, but not always. Sometimes it's just they know how to meet other people's needs. And then intrapersonal, which is self-smart. Okay. If you think about what they call specials in school, what are we missing if we have art and body? Musical. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and the one under consideration is called existential. Or people who ask big questions. So I'm going to talk, since my background is early childhood, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you might recognize these in children, and then also how you might recognize them in adults or recognize them even in yourself. So what do you think linguistic word smart people are good at?
Reading.
Reading,
Writing.
writing, talking.
Yep.
Reading, writing,
Language.
speaking.
Yeah.
Anything to do with language, absolutely. So word smart students, whether you're talking about kindergarten or a college classroom, are really easy to teach because they like to read, they like to write, they love to participate in class discussions. It's pretty easy to engage a word smart student. How might a word smart student misbehave or be disruptive?
Talk back.
They talk all the time. Not even necessarily talk back, but just talk all the time. So when I was in first grade, still am, but I was very word smart. And I had this wonderful teacher, Mrs. Wallace, and she made a deal with my mother that if I didn't interrupt her during the day, that she would allow me to stay after school and have milk and cookies with her.
Ooh.
And I don't actually remember having the milk and cookies, but I do remember the day when I got sent home on the bus. Like, I remember being so upset that I got sent home on the bus. So years later, Mrs. Wallace retired and she moved to Newburyport, where I live. And one day we were in the grocery store and my youngest daughter was with me. And she said to her, Maggie, how old are you? What grade are you in? And Maggie said, I'm in Koinonia kindergarten because I missed the cutoff date by one day, and I'm going to be going to Bresnahan kindergarten next year, and I really want to have Mrs. Doogie, but my mom says she can't ask, and I don't know why she can't ask because my sister had Mrs. Doogie, so every night I just pray that I'm going to get Mrs. Doogie, and if I don't, I may not have a very good kindergarten year because Mrs. Doogie's such a good teacher. She went on and on and on, and then she paused, and Mrs. Wallace said, clearly the apple does not fall far from the tree. So, she is a great student. She loves to read. She loves to write. She has a lot to say, but she's also had to learn that sometimes she has to let other people talk. And we can see that in adults. You can think when you're in a meeting, who do you know? You don't have to name any names, they might be in this room, but who do you know who's word smart? You know, there's always somebody who has a lot to say. They're the first one to participate. Okay, logical mathematical students, what are they good at?
Oh, numbers.
Numbers?
Probably the whole building, putting things together.
Yeah, often
Construction.
it's a combination of these two, people
Right.
who are math smart and art smart who are really good at construction,
Knitting.
Also,
because you need both, right?
also with math is also goes with music.
Right, and it's true, and I think it's good to realize when I explain this to students, I say multiple intelligences is like using the muscles in your body. If you go to the gym every day and you lift weights with your arms, at the end of 6 months, what are your arms going to look like?
Muscles.
Really strong. And what are your legs going to look like?
Spindles.
Nothing, right? And so if every day you practice art, you're going to be a better artist at the end of the year. If every day you sing, you're going to be a better musician at the end of the year. So some of it is about talent, but some of it is also about practice. So logical mathematical students are great at anything to do with numbers, anything to do with problem solving, and they often like things that have one correct answer. So I did an interesting experiment, maybe starting 3 or 4 years ago at Northern Essex. I asked a group of my students, they were in child growth and development, and I said to them, if you had a choice to take a final exam that was true, false, multiple choice, fill in the blank, or you had a choice to do short answers and an essay, what would you choose? And it was about 50-50. And the students who liked short answers and essays said, I love that, I can write about what I know, I'll always get partial credit. The logical mathematical students said, I want to study, memorize, fill in the blank, basically. I want to just have
Quick and easy.
right, quick. But it's funny because you say quick and easy, but for people who aren't logical, for me, I would never choose that. Never. So I worked with a colleague of mine, and we created 2 exams that tested the same material, and we gave students a choice. And now we've been doing this for 4 years, and across the board, 8 semesters, grades went up at least 6 points. So from A- to A, from B to B+, across the board. And what that really told me is, you know, if you are logical mathematical, you show what you know in a different way. Now, I don't do that for every single quiz, every single exam, but sometimes I do give students the choice. All of my exams were short answers and essays prior to that, because that's what I like, right? So we do what we like. I have to tell you, once I switched to those, half of my exams take me about 20 minutes to correct. Correcting multiple choice is so easy. Right? I sit in front of the TV, watch Murder, She Wrote, you know, check off. Essays take a long time to correct. But students who love this did so much better. Logical mathematical students and people are also rule followers. They love a schedule. If you say you are starting to speak at 6 o'clock, they are sitting in the seat at 5:59. Let's begin, right? And that is true in college. I have one student who's probably the most logical mathematical I've ever had this semester. And I said, if a paper is late, come right in.
Which I'm gonna peek.
Okay. I said, if a paper is late, it will be marked down 10 points. And I said, if class begins at 9:15, the paper is due at 9:14 in an email or 9:15 in my hands. So we've had this crazy snow, right? So we miss a class, and I assume students will bring it to the next class. Well, this one student on the snow day at 9:15 emails me the paper, and on the subject line it says, so it won't be late. Because that's the rule, right? Now college isn't in session. The college is closed. And so rule followers are great, but sometimes they can also be a little bit rigid. They're not so flexible. They're the children who, you know, you say, every Monday at 9 o'clock we're going to do this, and if the plan changes, you need to talk to them and say, today, we have a new plan. It's going to be okay. But, you know, for teachers, there is something nice about children who follow the rules most of the time. Okay, art smart people, what are they good at? Creativity, thinking outside the box. Let me ask you this. If you have furniture delivered to your house, do you already in your mind know where it's going to go? Or do you make somebody help you move it 3 or 4 different times? So who already knows in their head where the furniture is going to go?
Yes.
Just a show of hands.
Probably.
Who has to ask somebody to move it a few times? Yeah, that would be me, my poor husband. I'm like, I think I know, right? I say, I know exactly where it's going to go. And he'll say, honey, it's not going to fit there. Yes, it is. It's going to look great. Yeah, honey, it's not going to fit there. And then sure enough, he puts it where I ask him to, and it doesn't work, and we have to.
Right.
So visual spatial people are really, really good at envisioning how something's going to look before it happens. My middle daughter is very visual spatial, and she and my mom one day said, so we're going to redo the kitchen. And my friend said, you're letting your 16-year-old daughter redo your kitchen? And I said, listen, she is 16, but she is better at it than me. She picked a color. I said, Erin, I don't think this is... She goes, Mom, you'll love it. Erin, I'm not sure. She said, Mom, let's be honest. Who is better at color, me and Grammy or you? And she did it, and it's beautiful. So visual spatial people are really good at envisioning something that's not there. I had a student once, my first year teaching at Koinonia, and she was incredibly visual spatial, always thinking outside the box. And one day she was eating her lunch. Everybody was done. And I was saying, come on, honey, you need to hurry up. Come on. Yep, 1 minute, Mrs. Budzyna. She's got her apple, and she's going like this. I'm like, okay, sweetie, lunch is over. We need to, 1 minute. She finishes, and she turns her apple around, and she has bitten it into a face.
Oh.
I had never saw anything like it. Eyes, eyebrows, nose, mouth, little ears. She had bitten the skin off and completely made a sculpture out of this apple. Now, visual spatial students make a mess. They are all about a mess. You look at their desk, stuff is coming out. I have a student in one of my college classes. She has a notebook, and half is out, half is in. And yet, if you say to her, can you find the chapter 18 outline? She knows exactly where it is. I mean, to me, that would make me nutty to have a notebook that looks that way. But she's always like, oh, hold on. Like, I've got it. Here it is. She can always find what she needs. So visual spatial people need a little bit of freedom to do things in their own way. All right, bodily kinesthetic. Athletic. And also hands-on. So often when we think bodily kinesthetic, we think an athlete, which is true. But mechanics are also bodily kinesthetic. So if you're using your hands, you're doing something in a hands-on way. Actors are bodily kinesthetic because they're using their body to communicate. Bodily kinesthetic people cannot sit still. So does anybody know, if we're talking about children, how long the average 5-year-old can sit still and learn new information?
2 minutes.
I think the one that's about 30 seconds.
They actually say their age plus a minute, so 6 minutes. Does anybody know how long the average adult can sit and listen to new information? Not us. 20 minutes. Brain research has said 20 minutes. And we have college lecture classes that are 3 hours long. And this is what happens at 20 minutes. This is what you're doing. Oh, I love that scarf. I wish I had one for St. Patrick's Day. Oh, she knits? I didn't know she knits. I wonder what yarn store she goes to. She said she's going to be done at 7. Can I make it to Market Basket over the... That's what your brain is doing. You can sit because you're adults, so you've learned how to do it. But unless you're answering a question or engaged in some way, at about 20 minutes, your mind is wandering. And I think more and more in schools from preschool on up, we are asking students to sit for inordinate amounts of time. It is not reasonable to ask a kindergartner to sit for 2 hours. They can't do it. They're in their seat like this the whole time, tapping their pencil. And for a bodily kinesthetic student, it's just disaster. Now, people will say, well, I have a circle time, and they sit. And I will tell you why. Because you are big and they are little. You can make a child sit, but this is what they're thinking at circle time. I have to sit still, I have to sit still, I have to sit still. They're not learning any new information. They're working so hard at sitting still. And even with college students, what do many college students do during class? And high school students. Text. They do. And this is the thing. They are texting because they are disengaged. Now, some of it is they're used to the texting, and I say to my students all the time, tell me what text you're receiving. What text are you waiting for? Well, my friend's texting me to see if, they want to meet me after class for coffee. I'm like, you know what? You can't meet till after class. So shut off your phone. But it's become just a part of the classroom. I asked my own children, I have 2 in high school and 1 in middle school. The middle school one, not so much. But the high school one said, in class, 90% of the children text all day long. Now, I know my children don't because we have something on our computer so we can check and see when they're texting.
I didn't think they were allowed to have phones.
Well, they're not. But let me tell you, it is amazing. This is how you can text when you're a high school student and you know what you're doing. You reach into your pocket and you go click, click, click with one hand. My son has shown me. He can text without looking at the phone. Or you reach into your backpack and you go like this. They have learned how to do it. And I think that a lot of it is that they are just being talked at and not being asked to engage. So it's easy to be engaged with a piece of technology.
I want you to know I am engaged.
No, but we're going to talk about this. So she is knitting. This is what I will say. And I
don't mean to be rude, Deirdre.
But-
I don't know if you know me.
I do know you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do say this to my students. I say
This
for
relaxes me.
bodily kinesthetic learners, you need to find a way to help yourself engage. For some people, that is doodling. If you looked at my notebook from all these, I'm in these, big meetings at Northern Essex, and I'm drawing like palm trees and rainbows and but I really am listening. But the only way that I can keep engaged, you can tell I'm not great at sitting still, is to be doing something with my hands. I have one student who holds a piece of silly putty in her hand and literally during class just goes like this. That little bit of stimulation is enough to help her focus. Chewing gum is another thing that helps people who need to be. So I think there are things that,
I know.
When you think back to school, you were told, no chewing gum. But the truth is, chewing gum helps bodily kinesthetic students to focus. Now, I say to them, you cannot be in class like this. You have to be a little bit quiet about it. But they've started in Newburyport, which is really interesting, 2 years ago, when children take the UMCAS, they pass out gum. They pass out gum because they have shown that chewing gum actually helps to stimulate your brain while you're taking a test. They also have every child stand up and move for 5 or 10 minutes before they take the UMCAS because they've shown that little bit of movement helps you to focus. Okay, music smart, I think is pretty clear, but what are music smart students good at? Singing, playing an instrument, and also learning through music. So you can be music smart and not necessarily be an amazing performer. But if you learn things through music, you can be music smart. So the first school that I taught in Salem, kindergartners were expected to learn 75 facts about dinosaurs. Now, right, impossible to memorize 75 facts. So we actually wrote these little songs that had 5 facts about dinosaurs in them, and the children put on a dinosaur musical. And each of the songs had 4 or 5 facts about dinosaurs, and by the end of the unit, they knew 75 facts about dinosaurs. But if somebody had just spoken it to them, no way. And I think that's true. If I say to you, how many of you can think about a song that you knew when you were in high school? How many of you could think of a song? If I said, how many of you could recite a lecture that somebody said to you in high school? Nobody, right? So we remember music in a different way. A few years ago, my son was in a musical called Back to the 80s, which was very sad to me, that my high school years were so long ago that they wrote a musical about it. But he's playing these songs, and I am remembering every word.
Yeah.
Now, when I was in the 80s, I did not enjoy Cyndi Lauper, and yet, as soon as he put that music on, every word. I knew every single word. And I think that we do remember music in a different way. I also think for some children, having music playing quietly in the background helps them to focus. For other children, complete silence helps them to focus. And it's important to be aware. In our house, we have sort of the music area, the quiet area. I love music, but if I am focused on correcting something, I need silence. Like nobody, no distraction. If music's playing, I'm standing up and singing. I'm not really. But for some people, having headphones in and really listening to music helps them to concentrate.
Excuse me, but
Of course.
so many young people have music that's absolutely blaring and damaging their eardrums.
Right. And that is, right. That's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
Do we need to have that high intensity sound? No. No. And in fact, the music that helps you to focus often is music that's very quiet
Classic.
and calming. The best music, even though children don't want to hear it, is music that doesn't have words. Classical music really helps you to focus, but a lot of children don't want to hear that because that's not fun, but it really does. And when you put classical music on in an early childhood classroom, it is amazing how it can take the energy from up here and bring it down here without you doing anything. Really just sort of changes the feeling in a room. Okay, the naturalist. What are naturalists good at?
The outdoors and
Being outside.
Identifying animals, birds, bugs.
And
The
I would
elements.
say that this is probably the intelligence that is neglected the most in early childhood. And why would you say it's neglected the most in today's
they
world?
don't go outside that much.
Why? You're right. Why?
Why don't they go outside?
Computers,
Computers, technology is a big part. What else?
parents are working all the time,
Right.
they don't have time.
So parents are working, they drop their child off at 7, pick them up at 5, and really what they're doing is dinner, bath, homework, bed. And that's not a judgment, that's just the reality. And I think, I was so lucky when I grew up because I would come home. I had a mom who worked, but in the afternoon she was home. I came home, my mother said, go outside, don't come back until dinner time or if you're bleeding. Literally, that was it. Like we were outside for like 3 hours and we didn't even ask to come back in. It didn't even cross our mind. We would get a cookie, we would go outside, and then at 5:30 we would come back inside and have dinner. So that connection to playing outside and being in nature was just there. Now, less schools are really focusing on it, and some do. There's a great program down the road, Pathways for Learning in West Newbury, that has, a beautiful outdoor space. They do a lot of outdoor education. There are programs that are focusing on it, but for a child who's nature smart, if they're inside, they are spending all their time looking out the window, saying, how can I get outside? And it's really up to a teacher to bring that in, to bring natural materials in so that children can explore. And even with college students, I see college students will say, I hate science. A lot of early childhood students, I hate science. Why do I have to learn science? And I start by saying, you want to be an educator, so you need to learn everything. But part of it is they think they don't like science because all they think science is a test. They don't,
They were taught.
right, they don't
The way
think
they were
about
taught
science as
science.
being animals and plants, and they've sort of lost that really great excitement. There's a teacher at Newburyport High School, he's on sabbatical right now, but my son took biology with him, and Colin said, I want to take marine biology. And I said, why do you want to take marine biology, Colin? Like, you want to be an actor. And he said, I want to take another class with Mr. Yeomans. Like, that's why he took the second class. And in marine biology, Mr. Yeomans brings a shark onto the football field, and they actually get to dissect a shark. And Colin, who is not a science kid, came home, and he was like, Mom, it was the best day I've ever had in high school. I mean, he was so excited. And I think what that particular teacher has done is he's made nature smart students and other students really excited about nature, thinking about the natural worlds. And I think, things that growing up, we always had a garden. A lot of children don't. We always, were playing out in the woods and in our backyard. A lot of children aren't. And so for nature smart children, you don't always know they are until you start to ask some questions of them. All right, interpersonal. What are interpersonal people good at?
Social butterflies.
Socializing.
Okay, they love to socialize. They love to talk. They love to interact. They love to plan things. They love to lead groups. Where intrapersonal are better at knowing themselves, self-reflection. And I think, often we teach according to what we like. I love big groups. I love group work. I love interaction. And when I ask my college students, how many of you like to work in groups? It's about 50-50. How many of you like to work alone? And one day my son came home and he was doing a group project and he said, Mom, I hate group projects. I hate them. It's so frustrating. I'm working on this poster and the girls are putting little butterfly stickers and it's ridiculous. I just want to put the facts down. And then his sister Erin goes, Colin, I love group projects. It's so great. You get to have your friends over. You get to have snacks. You're all working together. And I think that's true whether children are in preschool or college, that some people are really energized by big groups and some people are really energized by self-reflection. And with young children, often if they step out of a group, what do we say? Come on, it's going to be great. You're going to love it. And I had a boy once, he's now in college, but my first year at Koinonia, and he came up to me one day and he said, Mrs. Budzyna, I'm going to go sit in the chair in the hall because I think if I stay in this noisy classroom for one more minute, I'm going to whack someone. And he said, so when it quiets down, I'll just do my work at this table, and when it quiets down, just let me know and I'll be back.
Wow.
He was very self-reflective. He was also the boy, we had a big end of the year show, and he said to me, I just want you to know I will not stand on that stage. And I said, what do you mean, honey? He goes, I know if I stand on the stage, I'm going to look at my mother and I'm going to burst into tears, and that would be humiliating. 5 years old. And I said, well, what do you think you'd like to do? And he said, I'd like to sit with you in the front row, and I will sing every word to every song and participate that way, but I won't have people look at me.
Okay.
Right? Pretty amazing. I mean, you don't often see students that self-reflective at 5. He was exceptional. But then I had to go tell his mother that he wasn't going to stand on the stage. And she was a good friend of mine. And at first she said, he has to be, all my children have been in it. And I said, well, what do you want? She said, I have a picture of all my children in the kindergarten play. I said, well, how about if we take a picture of him at the dress rehearsal, and you can have a picture, and then he'll sit in the front row. And that's just what he did. And what's amazing about him is he really knew what he needed. And I think intrapersonal people are able to say, this is what I need, these are my goals, this is what makes me happy. But sometimes we think they're a little bit aloof, because they may say, you know what, I don't want to join in right now. Like, I want to sort of stand out, see what's going on, and then I'll come in. Finally, existential, and this is the one sort of under consideration, are people who like to ask big questions. And I will say that my youngest child, she's 14 now, but she's very existential. I adore her. She's very exhausting. And she started, I knew that she was going to be tough to parent when she was 5. She was at Koinonia, and they went to visit the pregnancy care center. She was driving home from school with my mother, and my mom doesn't have a lot of money, and she was taking handfuls of change out of my mother's change tray and putting it in a baggie. And my mom said, Maggie, honey, that's Grammy's coffee money. And she said, coffee for you, milk for the babies, you decide. My mother was like, take the money, Maggie, go ahead. So
Imagine.
she was, skip ahead, I mean, many experiences like that. She was 11. She was doing a theater program in Lawrence. She was playing Annie. She was working with this great theater company. And one day we're driving home, it's like 9 o'clock at night, and I'm so exhausted. And she says, Mom, do you know that there are 50 kids in this play, and we rehearse in Lawrence, and there's not one kid who lives in Lawrence? And I said, wow, Maggie, no, I didn't know that. She goes, why do you think that is? And I've learned with Maggie, this is how I answer every question. Why do you think that is, Maggie? So I said, why do you think? She said, well, maybe they don't know about it. I said, that might be. And she said, well, maybe they can't afford it. And I said, that might be. She said, maybe they don't have a way to get there. I said, well, that could be. She goes, yeah, so Mom, I'm going to start a theater program in Lawrence. And I said, okay. This is 9 o'clock at night. I'm like just driving down there. Okay. So maybe a month later, she says, so Mom, when are we planning the fundraiser? And I said, what fundraiser? She goes, you know, Mom, for the theater program in Lawrence. And I said, oh, honey, you'd have to raise like a lot of money. She goes, yeah, I know exactly. When are we planning the fundraiser? So then a few weeks later, we're at Danvers Sport Yacht Club. I'm eating dinner, and I waitress there periodically. I'm eating dinner, and Maggie's gone. I'm like, where's Maggie? So I go upstairs. She's in the owner's office, her little 11-year-old self, and she's going, so, Mr. DiLorenzo, do you know that there are children in Lawrence who don't know that musical theater exists?
No.
And he says, no, Maggie, I didn't know that. And she goes, well, there are, and I'm going to change that, and you're the man to help me.
Oh, gosh.
And she convinces him to give her the ballroom at the Danvers Sport Yacht Club to do a fundraiser. So
Wow.
now she raises $6,000, and she has no children. Like, she's raised $6,000 for the children of Lawrence, and she doesn't know any children in Lawrence. So I say to her, well, you know, there's this man I know, Maggie. He does some great work in Lawrence. He works for this youth development organization. Why don't you give him a call? She calls him up, and she says, Mr. Stickler, I'm going to run this theater program in Lawrence, and I need you to find me about 50 kids. Now, he doesn't know her at all. I need you to find me about 50 kids. And he said, Maggie, honey, you'd have to raise like several $1,000s. And she goes, I'm not really worried about my ability to raise the money. I'm worried about your ability to find me the 50 children. And he calls me up and he goes, who is she? So she started a theater program. So the first year she did Annie with 50 children. Then she did Seussical with 60 children. And last year she did The Wizard of Oz with 70 children. And she's done this all just with her friends, middle school students. She does
How old now?
14. And what is interesting about existential students is they have an idea, and a lot of times people say to them, you're crazy. Because it seems impossible, right? It seems totally crazy. And when she was 5 at Koinonia, they had them write, and I still have it, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, I want to be a famous actress who helps poor people.
Oh,
Let
my.
her away.
And she does professional theater, and she helps poor people. Like, she had a vision for what it was going to be. Now, I will say, this does not matter if it's your child or your college student or your best friend. Existential people are exhausting because they don't take no for an answer. I've actually told her she's not allowed to say to me, Mom, I was thinking after 9 o'clock at night. Anymore. Like, we don't have those, like, you were thinking, wait, today was her first day of vacation. It was my first day of, like, not being on vacation. She's like, Mom, so I have the brochures. We're going to go canvass the downtown for my fundraiser. I said, honey, it's your first day of vacation. You want to go to the movies? No, I'm good. And she has a timeline. You know, my other 2 children, so much easier. But existential people can actually do really great things. But a lot of times the world says to them, you know, enough. It's too much. I have a college student who came to Northern Essex 2 years ago and said to me, I just want you to know, I know that it takes 2 years to finish Northern Essex, but I'm going to try to finish in a year and a half, start Merrimack early, and then just take the couple classes that I need in the summer. And I said, that you can't do that. You have to do the practicum. Like, you can't, it's not possible. Yeah, well, I'm going to do it. I said, well, it's not possible. Well, this student is doing the practicum, finishing the practicum, but was able to figure out a way to let Merrimack let her take classes while doing the practicum, and sure enough, is doing everything ahead of the game. So I think sometimes, you know, it is sort of, if there's a will, there's a way, right? You have this sense of where you're headed. So what Gardner said is, the first thing you want to do is identify what your intelligences are. Because the truth is, you will always be drawn to doing what you're good at, right?
Yeah.
So I'm word smart, I'm music smart. Those are the things I love to do. As a teacher, you're going to often shy away from what you don't love. So I'll say to my student teachers, you know, they'll say, oh, I hate science. Okay, but this is the thing. You are going to be teaching a child who's the naturalist, and you have to find a way to love science because you're going to have a child who loves science. So knowing first what your strengths are is important, but also,
knowing your weaknesses.
right, knowing your weaknesses and how you can help develop that. The other thing I'll say is a lot of children and also adults aren't aware of what they're good at. And they're not aware because they haven't had the experience. And I'll give my mother as an example. So my mom, when she was maybe 40, took a painting class at, I'm forgetting the place, I think it was called Heart of Byfield. It was in Byfield somewhere. She took a painting class, and about an hour into the class, the woman said to her, "So Sue, how long have you been studying painting?" She looked at the clock and she said, "An hour." And it turns out my mother is a very good painter, but her experience through her whole childhood, she had great parents, great upbringing. She went to Catholic school, and what do you think her art experience was?
0.
0. She says, "We painted the Virgin Mary the week before Christmas," right? That's it. So even though she actually was really art smart, nobody ever said to her, try to paint or try to decorate. I grew up in a house that was like white walls, brown furniture. At 40, suddenly she discovered that she was really good at art just through taking this course. And I think that a lot of times we, maybe we never had the experience, or somebody told us once we weren't good at it, and so we stop. And so what Gardner says with children, or any students, is that you need to expose them to all of the intelligences. And that if every child has the experience of trying each of the intelligences, then you're going to be teaching to their strengths, but you're also going to be building up their weaknesses. So if a child is really body smart and science smart, then when it comes to word smart, they won't feel so discouraged because they've had the success of being good in a certain area. The other thing that he talks about, and I think this is really important, is he calls them all intelligences. So often in public school, we say we're studying reading, writing, math, science, social studies, and then we're going to specials. And what are specials? Art, gym, music. And they're considered extras, right? They're considered sort of, well, that's what we do for fun. We study hard, and then we go have fun in art.
And they're also expendable in the budget.
So expendable in the budget. And there's a great video, if you're looking for something to watch on YouTube, an educator named Ken Robinson, and I think it's called How Do Schools Kill Creativity? But if you go on YouTube and you write Ken Robinson creativity, it will pop right up. And he talks about how there's sort of this hierarchy of subjects worldwide, and that at the top are reading, writing, and math, and then underneath are science and social studies. And even in the arts, there's a hierarchy that you always keep phys ed because you're not allowed to get rid of it because it's a federal mandate. And then there's art and music, and then at the very bottom are theater and dance. And that almost no schools have theater and dance in elementary school. And if you have to cut something, you cut out art and music, right? That's how it happens. And in fact, children who are art smart or music smart or body smart, that might be the only thing that keeps them coming to school. Like, that is what does it. And at a young age, they're told, you can't be an artist. You won't make it as a musician. You won't be able to, you'll never play pro ball. And so at a young age, they stop trying. And I just read this really interesting book last year, and there was a chapter in it. It was written by Malcolm Gladwell. And there was a chapter in it called 10,000 Hours. And it talked about how to be really good at something, you need to spend 10,000 hours doing it. And I think what happens is, at a young age, children are told you'll never make a career of it, and schools say this is unimportant, and so they don't put the hours in. They don't learn how to become really, really good at it. And, what Gladwell says is, if you really want something and you work 10,000 hours at it, you will be good at it. I have an uncle, Joyce knows, my Uncle Tom. He was 65, and he decided he was going to run a marathon. He had never run in his life. He was in good shape. He was a swimmer, and he was in good shape, but he had never run a day in his life. And he literally just started every day, running a mile, then 2 miles, then 5 miles, then 10 miles. And at the end of a year, he ran the Boston Marathon.
Oh my.
And what he said was, if you have no health problems, the only thing that stands between you and running the Boston Marathon is wanting to run the Boston Marathon. That's it. It's about time. And what Gardner says is we want to give children equal time to at least explore their options. If we let them explore all of the intelligences and then they decide they don't like music, okay, but at least give them the experience. The other thing that he says, which I think is really interesting, is can anybody guess on this list what two intelligences in his work led to the most success? What combination of intelligences? So assuming we have all, but to lesser or greater degrees, what two, if the two were your top?
How to define success, but
Naturalism,
music, I mean,
music,
financially, music. No, science.
People and words.
Math.
People is one.
Yeah.
Oh,
music.
Visual, spatial.
We're going to have it narrowed down soon. He actually said people and self-smart.
really?
And this is what he said, and I want you to think about this. First, we'll talk about adults and then children. So if you are both people smart and self-smart, you can work as part of a group, you can lead a team, people listen to you, you're able to get along with people. And if you're self-smart, you know how to set your own goals, you know how to let people not abuse you, you know how to do what you need to have a happy life, and that combination is a really strong combination. In an early childhood classroom, if you have children who get along with everybody and are very self-motivated, you could teach them anything. I mean, really, what teachers spend a lot of time doing is sit down, be quiet, say I'm sorry, share, get along. If you have somebody who has these two skills, then they're going to actually be very successful. And he says when you talk to children, you want to talk about it as an intelligence. Because often what we say is, you're such a nice girl. Which sort of demeans instead of, you are really people smart. And being people smart is going to help you in so many jobs. And I remember my own children, I talk to them about this all the time when they were young. And one day my daughter Erin was sitting with Colin, they're a year apart, and Colin is very strong academically, and Erin was struggling a little bit with math or something. And she said to Colin, I'm never going to be as smart as you are. And he said, Erin, I'm never going to be as nice as you are. And the truth is, she has skills that in life are more important than straight A's. She's very quiet, but she has incredible people skills. She knows how to make people feel good about themselves. And that, Gardner said, you can't just throw that aside and say, you know, oh, well, she's such a nice girl. You really need to say the skills that she has are going to take her to places that are really important. And SAT scores are one tiny bit.
I was going to say, you're not going to get the A's in those.
Right, right.
So, oh, you're stupid, but no.
Right. I think that it's really about rethinking it, about talking about who a person is in a really different way. All right, so now I'll let you look at the handouts for a minute. The first thing I want to say is on the top of this handout, I have my contact information. I'm much better at responding to email than phone, but I will respond to phone, but it might take me a week. But if you, there are some really great online surveys that you can take to show which intelligence you have. So if you want me to send you a link to the survey, there's a great one that I have. It takes about 20 minutes. You do it on a computer, and then immediately it pops up and will tell you what your top intelligences are. So if that's interesting to you, just send me an email. This is my email at NECO,
Send for
and
it.
I will send it to you.
That's for
You have to say it for the camera.
Oh, my email is Budzyna, DBUDZYNA @necc.mass.edu. Phone number 978-556-3456. Thank you. So if you'd like a copy of that, just shoot me an email and then I'll send it to you. And it's interesting. I think people will say, oh, I'm definitely this intelligence. And then they take it and, you know, you might surprise yourself a little bit. I say to my students, this is a little bit of a cheat sheet, just to show you each of the intelligences. I won't read the whole thing, but we'll look at the linguistic intelligence, think in words, They enjoy reading, writing, telling stories, paper, class discussions, open-ended exam questions. So this is just sort of an overview of each of the intelligences. I love this quote, which is a Gardner quote. It's not how smart you are, it's how you are smart. And I feel like now that I have children who are middle school and high school, that is a big part of what I'm talking with them about is, what do you really love? What energizes you? What are you good at? Not what are your grades, which are good, but what really do you love?
What turns you on?
Well, yeah, what turns you on? What do you love studying? What are you good at? What excites you? And I think that that's an important part of deciding what path you're going. Not, what's your grade point average? What are your SAT scores? Which I think is somewhat limiting. On the back, this actually comes from another Thomas Armstrong book, which is equally good, Multiple Intelligences in the Classroom. And when I lecture at the college, I say, this is a great way to think about testing what college students know. Often, I think professors think, I talk, they memorize, they take an exam. And there's so many other ways to show what you know. It's not just about taking an exam. So with linguistic, read about it, write about it, talk about it, listen to it. Logical and mathematical, quantify it, think critically about it, conceptualize it. Spatial, see it, draw it, visualize it. Bodily kinesthetic, build it, touch it, act it out, get a gut feeling. Musical, sing it, rap it, listen to it. Naturalist, classify it, categorize it. Interpersonal, collaborate on it, teach it to one another. Intrapersonal, connect learning to your personal life. Set goals, self-evaluation. And existential, start with big questions first and then examine specific details. And I think there is a way of designing a curriculum, whether you're talking about preschool or college, that can really meet the needs of every learner if you think about different ways of sort of showing what they know. Another thing that I do with my students is I ask them to think about each intelligence and a famous person that they might know who might have that intelligence, and also careers where you might use that intelligence. So can anybody think of a famous person, and this could be somebody living or dead, who might have linguistic intelligence?
Robert Frost.
Robert Frost. And then can anybody think of different careers where you might use a linguistic intelligence? Editing.
Foreign service.
Foreign service, if you were a playwright, if you were a child's book author, if you were a reporter. And I think it's important to speak to students about all the different ways you could use the intelligence, because often you think linguistic, I read, I write. But how can you use language? As this gentleman said in the back, linguistic means you love language. And there are lots of jobs where loving language is really, really important. Visual spatial. Who's somebody famous who's visual spatial? Art smart.
Mexico. It's been thinking in my head.
Excellent.
It just came into my brain.
That's
Mexico. Why, I don't know, but there we go.
Well, that was great.
Monet. I mean, you could just
Monet.
Designer, clothes
That's
designer.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Architect.
Architects.
Well, yeah.
And so if we're talking about careers, somebody who's art smart could be an artist, they could be an architect, they could be an interior designer, they could be a fashion designer. So often when we think about visual spatial, we think about being an artist, but a photographer is visual spatial, an architect is visual spatial, so there's lots of ways to use those intelligences. We'll do one more. How about bodily kinesthetic? Who's somebody famous who's bodily kinesthetic?
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady. Okay, so we think of an athlete.
Athlete's right.
Can we think of anybody who's not an athlete who's bodily kinesthetic?
Trainers that you go to a gym.
Personal trainer, if you go to a gym, so that's a career, a personal trainer, an athlete.
My grandson is into karate.
karate, somebody who does
Yeah,
karate is bodily
karate.
kinesthetic. If you think of an actor like Jim Carrey, who's very physical with his body, a lot of people on Saturday Night Live who do that physical comedy,
Yeah.
they would be considered bodily kinesthetic. So I think, again, when you're thinking about each of the intelligences from an educational perspective, I try to say to students, what intelligences do you have and how might you use them? How could you use being bodily kinesthetic in a career? How could you use being interpersonal in a career? In the college success class that I teach, a lot of times students come, it's their first semester, and they say, I have no idea what I want to do with my life. And I say that is 90% of the people who are here. Don't know what they want to do. And so we do this survey that I would send to you, this multiple intelligence survey, and then I say to them, okay, so you know that you're bodily kinesthetic, or you know that you're musical, or you know that you're intrapersonal. What are some careers that you might explore? And it's amazing because they're coming out of, a lot of local high schools, and they say, nobody has ever asked me that. Nobody has ever said, what do you want to do? And my daughter, my middle daughter, was deciding between doing interior design and event planning. And she was talking with somebody at her high school, and she said, I'd really like to do some kind of an internship in interior design this spring, and then I'd really like to do something in event planning this summer and compare and see what I'd like. And somebody said, oh yeah, I know this great place where you can do fashion design. And Erin said, they're not the same thing. And somebody said to her, well, you dress really well. And she said, and they're not the same thing. But I think, we've talked a lot about you're really visual spatial. How could you use that? You're really people smart. How could you use that? And her brother and sister were talking about this, saying she'd be such a good event planner because in our house, when people are stressed, she calms everything down. And when you think of going to a big event, when people are stressed, you need that person to be able to calm everything down. And that interpersonal skill is what you need. And when you apply to a college, people don't generally say, are you interpersonal? They say, what are your grades? What are your SAT scores? But not, tell me a little bit about what sort of makes you tick, what you're good at.
And how do you change that, though, with the colleges putting the emphasis on this type of thing, and you saying you really should put more emphasis on this type of thing?
I mean, I think some colleges have. Some colleges have gone, SAT free, or you have the option to submit SATs or not. I think a lot of colleges now give you 3 or 4 choices in what you write about in your essay, and I think that that's a place where you can really say, this is who I am and this is what's important to me.
Okay.
But I think you have to be aware enough to do that. I mean, I think you have to as a student. We're working with a lot of area high schools and trying to work with guidance counselors. Haverhill, Methuen, Pentucket have CSS courses, Amesbury, embedded in their high school programs, so
What's
students
CSS?
can take College Success Seminar.
Okay.
So, it's happening slowly but surely. But I think unfortunately, and I'm not putting any blame on public school teachers, I think there's so much pressure for students to pass these tests.
Yes,
That-
that's
that-
part of the problem.
Right, that the
Teaching
way
to the
that
test,
children are taught, when I looked at, my 2 daughters were 2 years apart in kindergarten, same teacher, same school. When Erin went through kindergarten, they had a block area, they had a dramatic play area, they had 2 recesses, it was a completely play-based curriculum. When Maggie went, the block area was gone, the dramatic play was gone, recess was taken away, it was completely academic. And I remember them saying, Maggie can't sit still. And I thought, she's 5, so I do think that there's just incredible pressure for kindergarten teachers to teach what used to be first grade work and first grade teachers to teach what used to be second grade work, but I hope, I try really hard with my own children and with my college students to say, don't let one test score define you. Because I think that is, we know, educators know that one test is one day of your life. It has nothing to do with really who you are as a person. But I think it is, you know, and they're really trying now to look at the MCAS. Is it a good indicator? Probably not, really.
And also, I mean, just doing like tests. I have one son who was very like top in math. He didn't care for it. He was good at it. He loved to write. He wanted to be, a writer. He wanted to be an author. But oh no, you have to be math. And they push the math and push the math. I mean, he did his, the honors English and all that kind of thing. But his heart was in the linguistics.
Well, you know what? There's another great book. I'm going to write it down. I just finished reading it. It's so good. It's also by Ken Robinson. It's called The Element. And it's a fairly short book. It's totally worth reading. But basically what he says is in order to be a success, that you have to find your element. And it's where your passion, talent, and opportunity come together. And what he says is a lot of times in traditional schooling, we just look at kids who have a certain talent and an opportunity. So that's your son. He had a talent in math, and he was born into a family that gave him the opportunity to go to college. But he had no passion for it. So we see people who are working jobs, and they're good at their jobs, but they don't really like it. They're not passionate about it. We also see people who have incredible talent and passion. I would say this is true of these children in Lawrence that my daughter works with. Such passion, such talent, and they're just looking for an opportunity. And when they get an opportunity, they're doing amazing things, but they haven't had the opportunity. But I think often in, upper middle class America, what we see is children who have talent in academics who are pushed on a certain course because it looks good to say that we sent children to, especially STEM, science, technology, engineering, math programs. And then they get there, they get great grades, they do really well. I had a student, and she was straight A, 3.9 at Northern Essex. She got to her last semester student teaching, and she said, I don't think this is what I want to do.
Good for her.
And she was great at it, really good. And she said, I don't think I want to do this. And I said, you know what? You are 20 years old. Good for you. If you have an associate's degree, you can go and get a bachelor's degree in something else. But I think she had grown up in a family of teachers, and she was good with children, and people said, you're going to be a teacher, you're going to be a teacher, you're going to be a teacher, you're a natural. And then she got to her senior, her last semester, and she said, I can't do this for the next 30 years. So she had talent, she definitely had opportunity, but she didn't have the passion. Now, luckily, she went on, she did something completely different. And
education is never wasted.
right,
So,
and she was able, she had a family that said, okay, this is good information, but I think a lot of people do go on a different path.
It's so hard, too, I think, for kids, because they're in high school. What do you want to be when I'm 17, I'm 18, I can't decide what I want to do.
No, but she raised that question before.
Right.
When you said the test that you give, nobody ever asked them,
Right.
what do you want to do?
And I think what they say is, what do you want to be, instead of, what do you like?
What do
Just
you
talk to
But
me
they're
about
not
who
even
you
asked
are.
that in high school anymore.
Right.
And I think that's where part of the public education system is lacking. All they care about is the test scores so that they can keep their level
Right.
in the
Well,
various
and I think,
schools.
in their defense, if your test scores go below a certain point, you lose your accreditation,
Right.
you lose your funding. I
Right.
mean, so again, I'm not judging the schools, but I think you're right that if you don't have somebody saying to those children, let's talk about what's interesting. And, I was talking with my son about this because this whole applying to college experience has been a lot. And I said to him, you have to understand how lucky you and your friends are that they come home to a house where parents say,
Right.
what do you want to do and how can I help you figure it out?
Yep.
I mean, that really is privilege, right? People think of privilege as money, but privilege is somebody saying,
Choice.
right, like
Choices,
having a choice is a huge privilege. And I think a lot of children, even in upper income families don't have anybody saying to them,
Right.
what is it you really want to do? You raise a good
Yeah.
point.
My daughter teaches at Chelsea High School. Chelsea's an immigrant city, and many of the students in her classes often come from foreign countries where they've never even been to school in their home language, and now they're dropped in Chelsea, and they're trying to learn English and trying to learn when they've never ever been educated before. So it's a really tough road to, but when I look back to what we did with our two children, we tried to expose them to a lot of different things like drama. We took them to the theatre regularly. We took them to the ballet and the opera and things like that. And they must have got absolutely sick of museums because every time we went on vacation, we went to museums and art galleries. And now I love it that my son and daughter are taking their kids there when they used to say, "Oh my God, not another museum," you know.
And I think, what
Yeah.
Gardner says is the exposure piece is big. Even if what you
Oh,
learn is, I don't love this.
Yeah,
But still being exposed to it is important.
but they do it now. They're passing it on to their
Right.
kids.
So some part of it they thought
Yes,
was
they
important.
did.
Absolutely.
But when my daughter talks about what her poor students in Chelsea have to go through, that here she might have an 18-year-old who is looking after 3 or 4 or 5 of the younger kids in the family before he or she gets to school. Then he has to go home and give them food, and then he has to go to another job, all the things that we didn't have to work
Right,
with.
and I think that, for the teachers and the guidance counselors in those environments, what they're doing is dealing with the students who are in the biggest crisis. I mean,
Yeah.
really, that's so
And
sort
they
of.
have no opportunity, no choices in their lives at all.
Right.
You know, which is very sad.
So I am in no rush to go anywhere. So if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to stay as long as you'd like and answer them. But I also want to be respectful of people who, thought the presentation ended at 7. So if you have any,
Knitting group.
yes, and has a knitting group, yes, please. So feel free. I did give you my email and phone, and I would welcome phone calls or emails about this topic. I would welcome anybody who would like to stay after and ask specific questions. And I thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. Okay.
Yeah, very interesting.
You run into people that have obviously multiple intelligences, but